It came in the dark, not a storm, not a knock, but something quieter. A voice, a child's voice. "I never meant to see what I saw." A whisper, wrapped in water and winter and memory. It didn't belong in this world, at least not anymore, but it arrived anyway. A letter, not in Olivia's world, but somewhere else. Somewhere we haven't seen, yet. She woke with a start, candle still lit, journal still open, fire nearly out, no voice in the room, just breath. And that same ache behind her ribs, like the story wasn't finished. Like silence had left something behind. She looked at her hand, empty, but her heart felt heavier because something had just returned, something that never really left. This is the Vicar's confession. He hid more than a name, brought to you by The Hidden Chapter. Some truths don't hide in silence. They wait in plain sight. The silence was supposed to end, but the river wasn't done speaking. Each time she came closer to the truth, it slipped just beyond her reach, like memory, worn thin by time. The journal held answers, the rosary, a wound, but something deeper still remained, unopened, unspoken, unburied. She thought it was over. She thought she could sleep. But silence never stays silent, not when it carries someone else's truth. This is The Hidden Chapter, and it's not finished yet. She waited 3 nights, not out of fear, but because something inside her knew. Once opened, it could never be unopened. The box sat on her table like a question, wooden, rotting, wrapped in silence. Tonight, she lit a second candle and untied the string. The cloth was stiff, cold, like it had been hiding guilt. Inside, a photograph, a bracelet, and a single torn page from the Vicar's journal. She didn't move at first, just stared, like the objects weren't just relics, but witnesses. The photograph faded beyond age. 2 children on chapel steps, one smiling, one not. But Olivia only saw the eyes. One of them was the boy, and the other, a girl. The bracelet sat beside them in the picture, and now, in her hand. It was delicate, braided, child-sized, worn, threaded with red and white, with a single name bead. But the name was incomplete, just 4 letters. L-I-L, and the rest torn away. Her breath caught. The journal page was worse, scrawled, hurried, and ending mid-sentence. The girl ran toward the chapel. She was bleeding. He tried to follow, but that was all. A jagged tear through the final line, like it had been ripped out of time itself. She closed the journal, but not because she was finished, only because she wasn't ready. The box didn't bring answers, it brought echoes, and one truth that couldn't be unspoken. The Vicar had written everything, except the whole truth. She stayed up all night, not reading, listening. The wind moved through the trees like a warning, not against the truth, but against what the truth might cost. She opened the journal again, and this time, the words were waiting, lines she hadn't noticed before, folded into the margin, like the vicar was afraid to say them too loud. She came to me, it said, crying, hurt. She didn't know how to say it. A long pause on the page. Then, she ran to the chapel because she thought it was safe. Olivia traced those lines like they were scars, but the page didn't end there. Below it, a name she didn't expect, a last name, a powerful one everyone in Dunsmuir still feared. She read the next words out loud, barely a whisper. Her father came that night, told me she was confused, said if I said anything, I'd be removed from the church, and she would disappear. The words weren't crossed out, they were burned in. The vicar had written them like someone begging history not to forget. Olivia leaned back in her chair, eyes closed, trying to imagine what that moment must have been. Then, a sound, not real, not from outside, but from the journal itself, a memory, his voice, faint, torn, like breath trapped between pages. I thought silence would protect them, but it only condemned her. Olivia didn't speak, didn't move, just let the ache settle inside her, because sometimes the only thing more dangerous than what's said is what's silenced. He left it before sunrise, a small wooden cross, carved by hand, placed gently on the chapel step. No note, no explanation, just the shape of grief, left behind. She found it by accident, almost stepped on it, and when she picked it up, she knew it was his. She walked to the cottage, no plan, just the cross in her hand, and the ache in her chest. He answered, didn't speak, just looked at her. Eyes that had carried something too long. Eyes that had learned silence the hard way. She didn't ask if he remembered. She didn't need to. She held out the cross, waited. And finally, he spoke. Just one line, quiet, almost a breath. I didn't know what he saw. That was all. He shut the door, and the wind began to rise. She stood there for a long time, not angry, not afraid, just undone, because the silence had never been his to carry. But he'd carried it anyway, not out of guilt, but grief. Grief too old for his age, grief that wore the wrong name. He hadn't buried the truth, he had just outlived it. She hadn't expected to find anything new, not after all this. But the old drawer in the vestry, jammed shut for years, finally gave way. Inside, a box, smaller than a Bible, heavier than it should have been. She lifted the lid, and there it was, a second confession. The vicar's handwriting, shaky, furious, unfinished. It was never meant to be read aloud, not by the church, not by the village, not by anyone. He named the girl, not fully, but enough. He said, she was only a child, and I was too afraid of her father's shadow to speak her name out loud. He wrote, I chose peace over truth, and then scratched in at the margin, as if after days of guilt. But peace built on silence isn't peace at all. There were no signatures, no dates, only the ache in the ink, the kind that comes from a man who waited too long to tell the truth. And then, something else. Folded at the bottom, an envelope, newer, sealed. On the front, just her name, Olivia. No stamp, no handwriting, just printed, typewritten, and it wasn't there before. She turned, looked toward the chapel door. It was open, only slightly, but the wind hadn't blown it. She stepped outside. Snow drifted gently across the stone steps, and there it was, another envelope, identical, waiting, not from the past, from now, from someone who knew she was looking and who wanted her to find this next. She walked through the graveyard, one footstep at a time, not to visit the past, but to remind it that she was still listening. The names carved in stone, they weren't all true. Some were missing, some were stolen. The wind moved gently through the trees. It carried something with it, a whisper, the girl's name, soft, like someone finally remembered her. She remembered, that's all it said. Some truths don't scream, they settle, they rot, they rest where no one dares to look. But silence, it always has a cost, and someone always pays it. So we ask, who gets protected and who gets buried? What stories have you been told to forget? What silence have you inherited that was never yours to carry? Have you ever been told to keep quiet when you knew it wasn't right? Have you ever watched someone bear the weight of something they didn't deserve? What would happen if we stopped protecting the silence and started protecting the truth? If this chapter stirred you, don't let it end here. Speak it, even softly, even just to yourself. Like this story, if it left a mark, share it with someone carrying a quiet burden. Subscribe if you feel the next chapter calling your name. Because beneath every silence is a truth still waiting to rise. This is the hidden chapter, and we're not finished yet.
And now, a final word from the hidden chapter. Maybe it was just fiction, or maybe it came closer to truth than we're ready to admit. Yes, AI helped shape the bones of this story, but every turn, every shadow was carved with intention. If even a whisper of it stayed with you, don't let it vanish. Comment, share the story, and listen closely because the final chapter is calling.